Hi, I'm Larry Castle here with Ken Brown for episode 100 of That's a Good Question. Is the problem Trump or the FBI? And some other stuff too. Wow. Well, what a week. I was joking just before we started recording that it was really nice of Attorney General Merrick Garland to remember that it's our 100th episode, so we could do something special this week. Seriously, we've had this week a series of firsts in the political realm, and they're so outside the norm that they actually threaten to disrupt the quiet and the peace that are the reason the Bible instructs us to pray for the government, right? As I mentioned last week from 1 Timothy 2. Yeah. And this is kind of a recurring subject for us over the last couple of years. Yeah. So we'll want to talk about this item in the news, the search of the former president's home, for those reasons. But it also falls, as I said earlier, on the week of our 100th episode. And it offers a good topic for our final weekly podcast as we do these as we've done in the past, weekly releases. So after today, we're going to go back to we're going to go to a monthly schedule. We're going to every second Saturday of the month publish a new episode. And we'll have podcasts in between there as needs arise, as news and current events call for it. Mm-hmm. So also for this episode, as we mentioned last week, we asked for any questions that our viewers, our listeners have, and we did get a few. So perhaps at the end, we'll have enough time to kind of hit those in rapid fire as well. And we'll spend the majority of time, though, talking about what happened this past week. So on Monday evening, if you have news alerts on your smartphone, who doesn't? No, I think people who watch this podcast probably do, actually. Yeah. So if you had those set on your smartphone, they were blowing up Monday night. And it was because the former President Trump, alerted the world to the fact that his residence in Florida had been searched by the FBI. He used the term raided by the FBI. Right. And so you texted me at about 7:30 that night, and we and the other pastors at our church had a back and forth about what would all this, what is all this going to mean? And I'm sure people around the country were doing the same thing, since this has literally never happened before. We've never had a former president's home searched by the government. Right. So the unprecedented nature of that means that one of these two sides has done something wrong. And I'm not just saying they've made a mistake. One of these two sides has done something incredibly wrong. Yes, right. And that's why we've titled this episode today, Is the Problem Trump or the FBI? So how did we get here?
Well, you said that we had a series of unprecedented things. So we're going to talk mostly about this one. It's enormous, so that you had this search of a former president's home. But also this past week, former President Trump appeared for a deposition in yet another legal entanglement that he has about his businesses. And he pleaded the fifth 440 times.
Wow.
And that is from someone who is on record as saying only guilty people plead the fifth. That's when he was talking about Hillary Clinton during the campaign.
I heard someone say this week that the worst former President Trump's worst critic is previous President Trump.
Exactly. There's always a tweet. There's always some statement to come back to haunt you. Yeah. So he pleaded the fifth in this thing about overvaluing his properties for loan purposes, undervaluing them for tax purposes. We'll see how that comes out. But he's got a lot of plates spinning. But by far the biggest one is this, what happened this past week. And I was surprised when I saw those news flashes about the FBI searching Trump's home. I was surprised partly because it was so late in the day. As you said, the news came at around 7-ish, and the source was not the FBI, but it was Trump himself putting out a statement. Now, it turns out that there was a local journalist in the Palm Beach area that had reported on it late in the day, but that journalist had little reach. It was not until Trump put out his statement that the whole world, literally the whole world, became aware of it. And that's actually somewhat important to the story. Who puts out the first statement? to set the narrative. And no one knows the importance of shaping the narrative like Donald Trump.
I've heard the phrase "get out ahead." We got to get
Get ahead of the
this.
story.
Yeah.
Exactly. He put out a statement saying things that can be objectively confirmed or can be falsified, and some have already been falsified. For example, he's said this week that the FBI agents showed up at 6:30 a.m. That was a complaint, even though he wasn't physically there in Florida for this search. He was at his place in New Jersey, but they actually showed up after 9 o'clock, which is unusual. Now, it might seem like a small matter, but that's unusual that they would actually show up that late, because they normally do go first thing in the morning. And the warrant that the FBI had allowed them to go and conduct the search anytime between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m.
I wonder if that time statement was just based on the warrant, kind of just sloppy reporting of.
On Trump's part?
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't there when it happened.
He wasn't there when it happened. His attorney was.
Yeah.
His attorney signed off. So I doubt it personally. But
seems like a silly mistake to make to get that wrong.
And here's the thing: is that there's this whole kind of cottage industry now around people that are raided to make it look like I've really been victimized here. And part of the victimization is how early they show up and just pull me out of bed in my pajamas kind of thing. Right. Now he wasn't there physically, but just to add that, show up pre-dawn raid kind of thing.
Pre-dawn. I've heard that phrase before. Pre-dawn raid.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the fact that they went later shows the sensitivity they have to the very thing I'm talking about, because they have been stung by savvy players like Roger Stone, advisor to the president, who was not only arrested, he was convicted. He was going to jail, and then the president commuted his sentence at the end of his administration. But Stone's house was searched in the very early hours, and he was arrested, and there were cameras from CNN there when it happened. Now, Stone played that perfectly, as he was able to look like a martyr and blame the FBI for alerting. Look at this. They've got cameras here. They're making a big spectacle out of it.
I remember this.
Now, a few weeks ago, there was a hot mic recording that was released between Roger Stone and a congressman, a flame-throwing MAGA congressman from Florida, Matt Gaetz. And if you care about this recording, you can look that up. Stone Gaetz recording hot mic, and it'll come up. And in that recording, Stone implies that he's the one who tipped off the news. In fact, Gaetz says that to him. You're the one who did this, didn't you? And he says something coy about it. So don't assume immediately that the person who says, "Oh, look what they're doing, they got the news here," they may actually do that themselves so that they get the benefit of getting out in front of the story and setting the narrative. And so the FBI did not want a repeat of that, so they show up later in the morning on a day when the former president was not there. That would also have been a very bad look if he's there and they're having to, push him out of the way or, that kind of thing. And, if he decided to make a scene, who knows? They called the Secret Service, though, ahead of time to say they were coming, and they didn't even wear their normal FBI windbreakers. Those famous, iconic, with the big FBI. They didn't wear any of that. So they were really trying to avoid that bad look. Yes. So both sides were trying to win the hearts and minds by not looking bad on the one hand, that would be the FBI, and then looking harassed on the other, and that would be Trump. So the gamesmanship began, and it continues. And it's something that, as I say, we all need to be aware of that really goes on. When law enforcement and politics mix, the political side will often appeal to the sympathy of the voters. And that's what Trump was doing on the one hand. And at least to an extent, the FBI was attempting to avoid looking bad if possible.
Yeah. The narrative has changed over just a few days as well. I recall the very beginning of the story started to circulate on all the right-wing news outlets that perhaps the FBI was even planting information there.
Yes.
What have we learned about that?
Well, later in the week, Trump is saying that all of the documents that he had at his residence were all on the up and up. He was allowed to have those because he had declassified them, all of them, when he was president. So there's no problem, he's saying, with him having them. But the problem with that is you can't have both. You can't say on the one hand they were planted by the FBI and they were declassified.
And as you said earlier, his lawyers were there
and his lawyers
while
were
they were doing
exactly.
this. So,
well, and not only were his lawyers there, His lawyer said that Donald Trump himself had a better view of that search than the lawyer did who was on site. And here's why. Because they have closed circuit cameras all through Mar-a-Lago. And she said Trump and his family were watching the whole thing in New York.
Oh, wow.
His own attorney said that. Okay. So he saw what was happening too.
Okay.
So if you saw somebody plant something, then now would be a good time to show that video.
Hopefully he's recording it.
Exactly. Exactly. But you can't have it both ways. You can't say, hey, I declassified everything. But on the other hand, no, they're planting things. So which is it? Are the documents in question legitimately the possession of Donald Trump, or were they planted by the FBI?
Yeah. And this is probably unhealthy of me, but I'm finding myself hearing the apologist view of that is he declassified everything that was really there, and then the stuff he's going to get in trouble for was planted.
Yeah. So just come up with some proof of that. Would be good.
That would be good. Exactly. So from the beginning, there's an attempt to spin the story in the most favorable way, even if it means changing the story as the week goes on. And that's really what you saw if you watched the news on this throughout the week. But let's talk about what we know regarding what the FBI is looking for and what they found now.
Well, at first on Tuesday and Wednesday, because this search happened on Monday evening, and then the full days of Tuesday and Wednesday, all we had was news reports using sources who said that what was being sought were classified documents, that Trump had at his home classified information that was not to be at his home. And since he's no longer president, he's not entitled to have it. But then the Washington Post reported.
And is it accurate as far as you know that some of those things wouldn't even be permissible for a president to have out of certain spaces in government facilities, regardless of whether he's president? You can't just take documents anywhere you want, depending on the kind of documents.
Well, yeah, and there is a thing called the Presidential Records Act, and it is to keep presidents from just taking stuff. Okay, because we have transitions, so we want you to leave the stuff because it belongs to the American people, and so you're not entitled to just take stuff. And remember, when the taking occurred, it occurs during a transition you really can't even use the word transition.
Right.
We've never had anything like this. There was literally
That's
no
important
transition.
Context for this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is happening during chaos that Trump himself created by claiming that he won the election. It's not even clear he's going to leave the White House. He didn't show up at the inauguration. It wasn't clear he was going to vacate. He did in the dead of night. I never saw. Normally you have this transition. You see that they're the incoming president. There's the outgoing president. They get together. All that. None of that happened. And you see the outgoing president drive away. None of this happened. And so things are boxed up. They are put in. They're put in literally a Ryder truck, and they are moved. And they're moved to Florida. Yeah. So this doesn't belong to you, and whether it's classified or not, it doesn't belong to you. And I'll talk a little bit about the whole classified thing here in a minute. Yeah. But then the Washington Post reports, based on, again, anonymous sources, that they were looking for documents related to the nation's nuclear program. Well, that raises the stakes. So all that was swirling around, and the spin campaign was continuing as Republicans went crazy right immediately on Monday night when this thing happened. They denounced the FBI, calling them all sorts of names, Gestapo, America's acting like a third world dictatorship, Nazis, this is like a communist country. I mean, all kinds of things said like that. In the far reaches of the right-wing social media sphere, immediately there was talk of revolution targeting the FBI and so on. And in fact, just a couple of days, within the last 2 days, we've had a guy down in Cincinnati, Ohio, go to the Cincinnati field office of the FBI and actually shoot at FBI agents. Yeah. And importantly, Republican politicians were demanding to see the search warrant, as was Trump. Right away, where's the search warrant? What are they? The implication was the FBI was hiding something. Why won't they show us the warrant? And the problem with that was twofold. One, the FBI is not allowed to release the warrant.
Right.
And think about why that would be. That part of that would be for the protection of the person who's being searched. Because that person is innocent until proven guilty. The search is part of an investigation. It doesn't mean you've committed a crime. And so they should not be able to release that and say, hey, we went and searched this person's place. If they can keep that on the QT, they should. And they're not the ones who put it out to the world. Remember,
Right.
Trump is the one who put it out to the world. But they're not allowed for the protection of the person who's being searched. So in order to release it, they need the permission of a judge. Secondly,
This is, sorry, you may be planning to get to this at some point, but I just want to make sure we don't skip over this. All of the people ranting about this know this.
right.
And they're hoping that all of us who are watching and get frothed up about
just
this,
don't know
so
it.
we watch them more, don't know it.
We don't know. And most of us don't know it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, why would we? And here's the other thing we don't know, which is related to what you just said. You say all these people know it. The whole time Trump and his people are saying this, he has the warrant. His people are get part of the process is when you go, we see, you can see that. You should know that.
He doesn't need to file a motion to
You've
release
watched
it.
enough Law and Order. You should know that you can say, hey, we've got a warrant. You hand
You've
it
been
to
served.
Right? You've been served. And so his attorney is there. They give, to the attorney. Now, if his attorney didn't tell him, hey, we've got the warrant, but he's been, his premises have been searched before. He knows how this goes.
That's sad.
Yes, but it's true. Not as as a businessman in the past. So not his home. This is the first time a home, but his business, his offices have been, and so he knows how this goes. And his attorney, he has the warrant. He can release the warrant anytime. So he and his people are demanding it be released when, in fact, they had it starting Monday morning, as is always the case when an American citizen is searched.
So if Trump and his attorneys had the warrant, which shows that this is what they're looking for,
Right.
then why? Just let's make crystal clear. Why is he demanding the FBI release it when he could have released it right away?
Right. Well, and that gets to something that's important to understand about this, but about similar situations also. There's a saying: if you have the facts on your side, argue the facts. If you have the law on your side, argue the law. And if you have neither one, attack the prosecutor. And this is why so often you see those who are under suspicion attacking the police. In this case, the FBI. And I would encourage our listeners to think about the FBI the way you think about the police. They are law enforcement. I recall Bill Clinton during and some of you may remember this, the Lewinsky affair in the 90s. And there was grand jury testimony. Kenneth Starr was the prosecutor, and it was just dominating the headlines. Remember that? Well, grand jury testimony is supposed to be secret. But some of Clinton's people who would testify would serve then, after they testified before the grand jury, as anonymous sources to the media, telling them what they were asked by the attorneys and by the members of the grand jury who can ask questions as well. That would in turn get printed, and then here's the really part you just wouldn't think about, or I didn't until then. The Clintons would then claim the prosecutor was leaking. And it was a way to discredit Ken Starr, and in fact, it worked. Just as an aside, I've experienced the same kind of phenomenon in ministry, where where I, as a pastor, am ethically obligated to keep confidentiality about something. But you have somebody who's causing difficulty, and let me just say right now, we haven't had this a lot at our church, but 20 years of ministry here, you're going to have a couple of occasions where a wrongdoer is counting on my ethical obligations to keep me quiet about the truth of a situation, so they can spin their own tale unchallenged.
Yeah, but as you can, you can correct the record though if someone's saying something untruthful, right? And let's reiterate what you said. It's not like we've got tons of experience at this at our church, but we don't want listeners to think this happens.
And you
all
can
the time,
correct
right?
the record. And yes, it's only happened a couple of times. But as far as refuting it, you have to know it's happening. And unfortunately, people sometimes listen to gossip and don't demand of the gossiper that we go to the source. So that would kill it right there, because then if somebody heard and they say, hey, this person's saying, and they come to me about it, now I'm at liberty to say, you know what, I know where the bodies are buried on this, and I could do that. But if people don't come to you with that, it simply starts to make the rounds, and you don't have a chance. And they're counting on the fact, the other party, that I'm not going to do what they're doing. And in fact, of course, I was not. So I've learned about it sometimes after the fact, and then, yes, I could correct the record and did. But the point is, sometimes a conflict is one-sided in terms of what each can say. The accused can say whatever they want, while law enforcement has constraints, and they have those constraints for good reason, that keep them from saying things publicly about their investigations. So instead, they're supposed to confine their talking to court.
And that dynamic came into play in a big way by the time we got to Thursday when, to everyone's surprise, the Attorney General made a 4-minute speech, statement, just a bombshell statement that changed everything.
It did. And, you say bombshell, which is overused, we all know, in media, but in this case, you're using it accurately. It was truly a bombshell. Attorney General Merrick Garland made a public statement, and he cleared up a few things, and he promised some others. He cleared up that he had, in fact, signed off on this search. There had been reporting that he had not, which was bewildering for something as important as this. I was certainly bewildered and troubled by that, so I'm glad to hear that he, in fact, it went to the highest level of the Department of Justice. He also said that, indeed, Trump's people had been given a copy of the search warrant, and they had also been given a list of what had been taken by the FBI once the search was over. He said that the warrant had been signed by a federal magistrate, which is always the case. And it's important to note here that in order to get a judge to sign the warrant, the FBI, in this case, who's seeking it, has to convince the judge that there's probable cause to believe one or more crimes have been committed, and that there is specific evidence of that crime at a particular location, in this case Mar-a-Lago, and at a particular time, that it's there. We have reason to believe it is there. Not it was there 6 months ago. It's there right now, and we can get it if you give us this warrant. And most important, he said that the Department of Justice had filed a motion with the judge to make this warrant public. He couldn't make it public. Trump could have any time he wanted, but was just saying, why don't they make it public, when he could have been making it public, for gamesmanship, honestly. And he also was asking the judge, allow us to make the list of what we took public as well.
Yeah, I've got to imagine, and I don't know if you keep up with this more closely, all of the calls for make it public probably seems like they would be made with the expectation that they'll never do that. So when he made this public, that had to be like, whoa.
Totally. That's what I mean. You can do all of that because you're playing against the other person's, restrictions, and you're counting on they'll never say anything. It's the same thing. If I'm the one who's leaking grand jury information to a reporter, and then the reporter puts it out, and then the very people who gave it to me, now I'm the reporter, and I say an anonymous source tells me that this is what they were asked in grand jury. And you hear that same person, you're the reporter, who gave it to you, now saying, look, those guys are leaking. The person who's telling that lie is counting on the journalist.
Their integrity.
They're not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Right. So you're exactly right. So they're counting on he's not going to do anything. Well, that's why many people have called this kind of calling a bluff. He does have at his disposal, if he wants, under extraordinary circumstances, to say, all right, I'm going to go to the judge. And let's see what the judge says. And he also included, and we'll allow you to object if you don't think we should do this.
That was just, so I don't know what I was going to say masterful. I don't want to make light of all of these things, but it really was strategically protecting. And I say this with respect because as I watch him do this, I recognize that here's a man who's being very serious about doing things the right way and knows that, or has a great reason to suspect that the people he's working with on this are not meticulous about that.
Yes.
And he really, the way that the process went so that he would be able to stay above board.
And still put the lie to that.
Yeah, and kind of let them reveal themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And which happened then, that 24 hours passed. Yeah. So, it changed everything, as you said, when he did that, because the other side could no longer make the FBI and the Department of Justice look bad by implying that they're hiding something, because now they're asking a judge to let them release the information. And interestingly, the Trump people, who, again, had in their possession the entire several days the warrant, and for days had the list of what was taken, they still took 24 hours. to say we're not going to challenge the warrant.
Yeah. So the warrant and the list of what was taken was released on Friday afternoon. So what does that tell us?
Now that the warrant has been released, some of the Republicans are now saying, well, we need to see the affidavit. Where's the affidavit? So see, you got three things. You've got the warrant that has to spell out that there's probable cause that a crime has been committed and that evidence of that is located at this place. And then you also have this second thing, that is that you must leave an itemized list of what you take. But there's the third thing, and that is the affidavit that the FBI has to submit to the judge to support their contention that a crime has been committed and that the evidence. So, the judge was obviously satisfied with that because they signed off on it. But what we don't have is that information, and that too is secret. Now, so you got some Republicans say, hey, we need to see the affidavit. So still implying, okay, you complied with that, but you're still trying to hide something.
I got to think if I'm them, I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
You do not want that affidavit.
Yeah.
Okay? And they know that. They know they don't want the affidavit out there, and they know that in all likelihood, I mean, he would have to go and petition again to have the affidavit. I would be shocked if that happens. But you have news organizations who are filing to say, I don't know if it's under Freedom of Information or what, but asking that it be released. So that at some point, certainly if a crime is charged, as I expect will happen, they would not have gone to the extent of what they did here if they were not confident that they could find what was necessary in order to charge a crime. And so we will eventually know what it was that led them to believe this. Did they have an informant, which looks likely, that told them, hey, there's stuff here, there's stuff that's possibly been destroyed. I'll talk about that in a minute. But they know the FBI cannot release the affidavit, so it would be unfair, in fact, to the person whose residence was being searched. This is an investigation to determine if a crime has been committed. Until then, you don't make a suspect look any worse than's necessary because, again, they're presumed to be innocent. Okay, so per the FBI search warrant, it allowed the FBI to look for and seize, and here's what it said, all physical documents and records constituting evidence, contraband, fruit of crime, or other items illegally possessed in violation of, and then it gives the citation in the U.S. Code of Laws, and it has three citations, 793, 2071, and 1519.
So then those are the sections of the criminal code that the FBI believes someone or someone's has violated. So what do those mean?
So yeah, and this is all happening. I had to look it up. Of course, we're not lawyers. What's a 793? It turns out Section 793 is what's commonly called the Espionage Act. It deals with national security secrets. 2071 is unauthorized concealment, removal, or mutilation of government documents. And then 1519 is obstruction, destroying, getting rid of, hiding documents that you're supposed to produce. So they're saying that Trump had at his residence materials which, under the definitions in the Espionage Act, would compromise our national security.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I heard people at the very beginning of the week calling out for conservative politicians. We better be able to see, we need to see that this rises to the level of national security.
And I agree with that.
And so we have.
Yeah.
And so did they find documents? So that's what the search was for. Did they find documents related to national security?
They did indeed, yeah. So not only did they get a judge to agree, okay, a crime of some sort has been committed here, and the documents to show it are there, and that the judge is given the particular laws that the FBI believes are violated, including the Espionage Act, and agrees with that. So it's one thing to say we think it's there, it's another thing to actually find it there. And they did. That receipt, that itemized list that they're required to leave, and that Trump's lawyer signed at 6:19 that evening, on Monday evening at 6:19, Trump's lawyer signed actually two itemized lists of things that they had taken. And that receipt of property taken that the FBI composed and that Trump's lawyer signed off on said they took 20 boxes of material. And we don't know specifically most of what was in those, but they did specify some of what those
Can I ask you a question if
Yeah.
you know the answer? I've read several places 11 boxes
All right, and this
versus
is the next
20.
thing. This is the next thing. So there's 20 boxes, and we don't know what all 20 contained in detail, but we do know they did call out some of what was in those, including 11 sets of material that were marked with security classification.
The
That's where
11
the
are
11
the
comes from.
security documents.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. And they even specified that of these 11, here's how it came out in terms of what the classifications were.
Different levels of security.
And there are 3 of those,
Okay.
it turns out. One is the lowest level, classified. And classified, I learned, means that it can cause harm to national security. And they found 4 such sets of documents related to that 4. Classified, it may cause harm to national security. Then the next level is secret. It may cause serious harm to national security. They found 3. Well, that's 7. That leaves 4 more.
We're not talking about 3 documents. We're talking about 3 sets,
of
like
documents.
3 boxes.
Correct. 3 boxes with documents in them. Yeah, and the box may have had other stuff in it too.
Right.
But it had these things in it. And then there's the third and highest, which is top secret. And that means may cause exceptionally grave harm to national security. And they found 4 of those.
Wow.
And one of the 4 top secret, and this one may be the most interesting, was marked, yes, top secret, but was also had this other acronym, SCI, which stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information. That's the nation's most highly sensitive intelligence, including nuclear. Now, they didn't say it was nuclear, but that's the kind of thing.
I've heard that compartmented term. Is that the kind of thing like each people in the process only know a part of it so that they couldn't even get together and cause harm if they
There's
wanted
part of
to?
that. It's doled out on a need to know. And you can only view it, talk about it, in a special facility.
That's what I was thinking of earlier.
SCIF. There's the acronym because it's that, sensitive compartmented information facility, a SCIF. So that's how sensitive at least some of what they found at his home was. Also, they said they found and they took under these laws information about Roger Stone's clemency. The guy that I was talking about that, probably asked CNN to come and film his thing so that he could get sympathy. And then he was found guilty, and then Trump commuted his sentence. We found information about that. What that has to do with anything, I don't know. They said we found information on the president of France.
Yeah, that was strange.
So what the nexus is, between those is not clear. But, the big story on the national security side is they found highest level national security stuff.
Yeah, and I think we referred earlier to nuclear secrets. Were any of the documents related to nuclear secrets?
That could be what was under that top secret SCI, sensitive compartmented information, but we don't know.
And if that's the case, I think I know, but I don't want to act like I know something for sure that I don't. But if that were the case, the president can't declassify those documents.
That's right. You can't declassify nuclear. You can't just on a whim. So part of what you're going to hear is, hey, a president can declassify and classify anything he wants until his last day in office. And for the most part, that's true, as I understand it, but not for nuclear secrets. There's a whole process for that. Yeah.
Okay. So what the former president is saying now, that it's been proven that he had what is the former president saying now
that it has been proven, right?
Yeah. We know that he's got these sensitive documents in his home. What's he saying?
Well, it's Hillary. So, Hillary had emails on a server that were improper. And by the way, that's true. And she got away with it. And that's true as well.
It's also irrelevant to this.
Well, that's the thing. So what is he saying?
We all agree that was wrong.
And I want to make clear that I agree that was wrong. She erased stuff from her hard drive, had her people smash literally with hammers, cell phones.
Yeah, that's suspicious.
Oh, do you think? Yeah. So Trump may have won the presidency, though. over her problems with that because they were so well publicized. It was in the news throughout the campaign in 2016, and the FBI announced that it was investigating her too. So that dogged her all the way through, as I'm glad it did. I'm not saying that there was, and I think when in July of 2016, James Comey gives a speech, remember that? We've almost forgotten about that, but he gives this speech saying, you know, we've been investigating, and he lays out all of the way she handled classified material and all of that, and you're sure, therefore, we are seeking an indictment. And then he says, but we've decided to let it go. I remember I was listening to it on the radio, and it was just shocking because he built this whole thing up and then finally says, but we've decided to let it go, which was amazing. But it hurt her that it was in the news as much as it was. And in October, they resurrected it again publicly. Jim Comey said, we're investigating her again because new information has come out. It took a week or something like that. It was right before the election. Many people believe that whole scenario cost her the election. Because remember, we all thought she was going to win. Everybody thought she was going to win. You know, even Trump thought she was going to win. Nobody thought Trump was going to win in 2016. So she did pay a price, possibly paid the price of the presidency itself. But I agree with him. Hillary should have been charged. But that changes nothing, to your point, about what you did. And if you've, in fact, done something criminal, we'll see about that. The other thing he's saying, so what else is he saying? Well, Hillary. And then he is now saying, well, Obama has, it was 33,000 or I don't know, 33 million. Sometimes he inflates the numbers. I don't know. But he says Obama's got 33 something in Chicago. And he just took those and carted those off to his personal place in Chicago, prompting the National Archives to put out a statement this week saying that they had been working with the Obama administration from day one, the way you normally do this, to ensure that all the documents that are going to go into his presidential library have been vetted. So if you want to look up that statement, they did that, refuting what President Trump is saying. And then what else is he saying? Well, just last night, he said that on the way out, I declassified everything anyway that were in my house, so that those security designations on them no longer apply. He put out a statement that said this: as we can all relate to, everyone ends up having to bring home their work from time to time. He had a standing order, he says, that documents removed from the Oval Office taken to the residence were deemed to be declassified. So if I take them out and I take them home, by virtue of me doing that, they are declassified. And I had a standing order for that. Now, no one heard of that standing order until last night. And so if there is some evidence that there actually was a standing order like that, and, you know.
Seems like that would be a dangerous standing order anyways.
Totally, for sure. So anyway, he's flailing, okay? And that, I think, is telling about his concerns about what it is that what they have here. Beyond that, other than the usual claims, what is he saying of a witch hunt, denouncing the sheriff, in this case, Merrick Garland, or Christopher Wray, who's the director of the FBI, who I would remind everyone or inform everyone is a lifelong Republican, appointed by the FBI director. Our current FBI director was appointed by none other than Donald Trump. And when he appointed him, he said he's a man of the highest integrity. Now, why is an FBI director appointed by Trump still the FBI director under Biden? Here's why. Most people don't know this, but the FBI director's tenure is 10 years. And that's on purpose by law. That'd be 10 years. They can be removed for cause. They can be fired, as Trump did with Jim Comey. He fired him in the middle of his 10-year tenure and replaced him with Christopher Wray. But it's a 10-year term. And the reason it's a 10-year term is that guarantees you will cross over administrations. And in all likelihood, 10 years means that you will be in a Republican and in a Democrat. Yeah. Because, only once in my lifetime has the same party held the presidency for 3 terms in a row. Most of the times, maximum, it's 2. You only have the same president twice. And then it turns over to the other party.
So Reagan and Bush, am I thinking of the right?
That was the 12 years, yeah.
And so where is this headed then? What advice do you have for us as we hear the news coming out.
Yeah.
How should we handle the news going forward?
Well, I think it's headed to an indictment. I just don't believe they would have done this if they were not sure that a crime has been committed. And now, who exactly is going to be indicted? You said earlier someone or someones has committed a crime. And this was at the president's house. These are documents that he is storing and he has. But he also has people designated to be his document people. And he has, in fact, I think it's 7 people that he designated to be his representatives to the National Archives as to what goes to the National Archives and what doesn't and all of that. 2 of those people in particular have been fanning out, and they may have some exposure here. One of them is a guy named Cash, spelled with a K, Patel. Cash Patel's name shows up throughout the Trump administration in the weirdest places. I'm telling you, you've never heard of Cash Patel, have you? But you will. And he's one of those people, and he's been on Fox News over and over again now, trying to explain this away. He may have some exposure here because he's supposed to be representing Trump with regard to these documents. He would be someone who knows that the documents were there, knows what were in the documents, knows where they were stored, that kind of thing. And another one is a guy named John Solomon. John Solomon is a journalist. He's a journalist that I have warned, if you're watching, some of you, we've had discussions about John Solomon and his so-called journalism, honestly. And, we can have a respectful disagreement about that, but I have warned you need better journalists than John Solomon. Well, John Solomon is representing Trump and the documents, and he's supposed to be an objective journalist too. I don't know how exactly how you square that.
Right.
So we will see who gets indicted. Maybe it's not Trump. Maybe it's Trump's people. Then we see if Trump's people flip, and you know how that goes. Someone though is going to be indicted. As I say, it may not be Trump, but rather his staff. So my advice is to be disciplined as you think about these things then, and as you draw conclusions about them. Don't do the knee-jerk thing. Don't do what happened on Monday. As soon as this comes out, Republicans start fanning out and start going crazy, and this is a third world country. And they're all counting on, we're not going to see the warrant, right? Well, then a few days later, we see the warrant, and we go, oh, okay, we see the itemized list. Oh, there's a bunch of sensitive stuff that probably is not supposed to be in somebody's basement, And why would somebody have it there? That I don't know the answer to that. I hope we'll learn the answer to. Why were these documents where they were? So be disciplined in the way you react, the way you talk about. Deflection only works for those who try to deflect. And the president is clearly trying to deflect. Hillary, Obama, those kinds of things. But it only works when people try to deflect if you choose to look away to where they're deflecting. Don't look away. Stay laser focused on the proof. The proof is found in legal documents. The proof is found in court. The proof is found in indictments and in convictions. Distractions and deflections jump to conclusions. Distractions and deflections are parsing whether he declassified the stuff before he left, so it's okay to have it in your basement at home and refuse to return it. Distractions and deflection are hearsay. For example, Trump put out a short statement, as I mentioned, about Obama and his 33,000 documents, supposedly, that has already been refuted. But he said this. He asked a question in the short statement. How many of those were nuclear? Word is lots. That's what he says. How many of those were nuclear? By the way, I have to admit, that sounds like an admission to me. That his material was related to nuclear, because he seems to be saying, I didn't do anything Obama hasn't already done. And then he says, word is he has lots of nuclear stuff. What does that even mean? Word is that, when did that become a standard, a source of information? And I do hear too many people doing that kind of thing. I've seen it on Fox News bunches of times. I'm hearing that this was an Antifa operation. I'm hearing that January 6th was an Antifa, right when it happened, that this is an Antifa operation. I'm hearing from who? Produce it. What does word is means? Distractions and deflections are speculation, like maybe the FBI planted the information. Here's Rand Paul this week, Senator Rand Paul.
I couldn't believe hearing him say that.
And he's saying, I don't know what they did. I have no way of knowing. Well, guess what? You can say that about literally anything. So you just get to throw stuff out there that they're planting. I don't know. They could be. Yep, I agree with that. Theoretically, they could be. You got any proof of that? If you don't have any proof of that, keep your mouth shut. Distractions and deflection are whataboutism. What about Hunter Biden? Now, it's my understanding that there is actually a Department of Justice investigation ongoing right now into Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, I don't know that much about him. He may well have broken laws. I do know this. He is a real piece of work. I know that. I mean, his personal life and all the stuff that he's gotten involved in. But unlike Javanka, that would be Jared and Ivanka, he was never in government. He's never been in government. Okay? So if Hunter Biden or anybody else has broken laws, I hope that they are found guilty and prosecuted. But he's not in government. And so I don't really care much what Hunter Biden does, but I do care that justice is served. Distractions and deflections are Trump is being treated differently. He's being treated, well, there's a sense in which he is being treated differently. He's actually being treated better because people who have the kind of stuff that he had in his basement that we now know that he had in his basement with those kinds of classifications, those people go to jail. Those people are in jail. Just look up the kinds of things that people have gotten in trouble for with classified information and how much of it they had to have. One of the most egregious is a gal named Reality. That's her first name, Reality Winner, Winner. Just look that up, Reality Winner. She was 24 years old. She was low-level staffer, but she got a hold of something about the Russia investigation when she was at the National Security Agency, just as a low-level, almost clerk kind of thing. And she took this one page and she gave it to a news outlet. And she went to jail for like 5 years. Wow. And she's still under house arrest to this day. That was one document. Okay.
One of the things that jumps out at me when we talk about that subject is just the posture we as conservatives, as a rule in public, have had over the last couple years when it comes to accusations of crimes and behavior of law enforcement. I mean, we're very respectful, and it's good.
That's right.
That we are. This is just flipped on its head.
That's right.
It's just so apparent to me what's happening here.
Well, and that's the next thing I was going to say. It's about distractions and deflection. They take place when you attack the police. And remember, I said at the beginning, think of the FBI as the police, okay? They are law enforcement. So you have people now saying, people who went after the Democrats for their crazy, and it is crazy, defund the police, now saying defund the FBI.
Yeah.
All right. And you had this attack, sure enough, this week on the FBI in Cincinnati, and only one, at least as of a couple days ago, only one Republican had spoken out publicly about that attack on the FBI. That is scary. Trump's team gave the warrant just about an hour before it was publicly released. I've had it the whole time, as we said. They gave it to a news outlet, a conservative news outlet, Breitbart. Breitbart put it out in unredacted form. What that means is the FBI agents involved, their names were put out there. So you now have a situation where FBI agents' names are put out there, and they have then been put in danger by people who, as you said, I thought we were always the law and order people. And what else should you do? Pray. This is big. And, I don't know where it goes, of course, but it is big. And this was indeed a monumental week.
Yeah, this could be one of the biggest stories in the history of our country. Correct. Really. I don't mean to or exaggerate that.
Yep.
And the consequences of it can be far-reaching, no doubt. All right, let's do some rapid-fire questions.
Okay.
And we've got a few questions from a listener that I want to address before we finish up this episode. We're getting up there
About 50
time
minutes
wise,
now,
50
yeah.
minutes,
Okay.
yeah. So, but we'll try to get these answers in here. So he writes, each political side calls the other fascists on a regular basis nowadays. What exactly is fascism, and what could it look like in America?
Well, fascism, that word comes from a Latin word. It means a group of sticks. But this group of sticks will often have like an axe blade attached to it. So they made up sort of an axe handle, right?
Okay.
And it became, in the Roman Empire, a Roman symbol of power. So fascism is about power, and power without democracy. It's the opposite of liberal with a small L, in the sense of individual liberty and freedom, even to the extent that people do things that we don't like. So in a liberal democracy, you allow freedom to everybody, even the people that are doing things, using it in ways you don't like. So it's here's an example of it. Here's the late Antonin Scalia, right, as a Supreme Court justice, and he's the one who dealt with the flag burning case. Guys burning the flag. Well, who likes that? None of us like that. Are you allowed to burn a flag? Do you have the freedom to do bad things? And that goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And none other than Antonin Scalia writes the majority opinion for that. And he says, yeah, you do. But in fascism, you don't. Fascism says, here's what's good, here's what's right, and we will impose that, even if, and you don't have those kinds of freedoms. So for fascists, the power squelches the things we disapprove. Because it's not democratic and not devoted to individual liberties for all, it arises from the right wing, and it goes far to the right in imposing what's best. Hitler and Mussolini were fascist in their views and their approach, and today you have someone like Viktor Orban in Hungary. But, of course, the left can be and is dictatorial too, and so in the end it can look the same with its concentration of power. But liberal fascism, to use the title of a book by Jonah Goldberg, the great Jonah Goldberg of the Dispatch, tends to start with the idea that it's going to be temporary, that our control is going to be temporary. The concentration of power is a bug, not a feature. It's necessary to get where we need to go. That's kind of how liberals would look at taking control, but it's only for a while. Trust us, this is all for your benefit. This is all for the people. With right-wing fascism, it's a feature, not a bug, because it's the best way to have the best society. Promote the best and suppress the rest. What would it look like in our country? We're having a severe test of it, frankly, right now. It requires the breaking down of institutions that constrain the power of the executive. And breaking those down and putting the power in his or her hands. You know, when at his inaugural address in January of 2017, then President Trump said, quote, "I alone can fix it." That was ominous. I've never heard anybody say something like that. Using the Department of Justice and the Pentagon for political purposes, as the way he did was scary. Another term with no political considerations by Trump would be, for me, very concerning, because he wouldn't have to worry about getting reelected or any of that. And the right in America right now is enamored with imposing a Christian culture on the nation, and so are warm to authoritarian figures like Orban, Putin, believe it or not. So what would it look like? It would look kind of like Hungary does now. And Tucker Carlson, who's gone there twice to do a show, and others can't wait for that.
Yeah, it's, it just, for somebody who has been out of the news cycle, I'm not watching it, glued to it like I was in my college days, to hear that kind of thing is just alarming, because it's the opposite.
Flipped.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
All right. So what's the difference between, you mentioned communism, socialism. What's the difference between socialism and communism? Are either at odds with biblical values? So here's the other question.
So socialism has the government control the means of production to distribute it to its citizens and to do so as uniformly as possible. I mean, that's really what socialism is. The government controls, industry, and then the fruits of what's produced are given to the citizens and as equally as possible. Its goal is equality, not of opportunity, but of outcome. And it seeks to guarantee that everybody will have a guaranteed kind of minimum, lifestyle and that kind of thing. Communism, you can't have communism without socialism, but communism is much more than that. It's based on the ideas of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels. Marx and Engels. Engels is a guy that doesn't get as much press as Marx does, but they actually co-wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1859. It's socialist, communism is. Remember that what we call Russia today, when we were growing up, was called the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So it's socialism, but it does not see the current structure like just run-of-the-mill socialism does. It doesn't see the current structure as benign, and so just in need of improvement toward equality. Let's try to move so that would be your average kind of liberal today, who's trying to amass through taxation as much for the government to then redistribute, right? And to try to be as equal in their minds, and that would be good. But Marxism and communism don't see it as, okay, let's see if we can't make this better by having more distributed to the people who need it. It sees a class struggle between the owners and the workers, and the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. That was the names they used. And it will require a revolution that defeats and forces the owners, the bourgeoisie, to conform. In the USSR, they had that revolution in 1917 under Lenin. After, though, a temporary time of state power over individuals, the state will eventually disappear. So that's what I mean about fascism, saying, no, you have to have the strong man all the time. The state will impose. Whereas this, in theory, for communism, it's supposed to be this temporary thing, okay, that will eventually allow the state, they actually believe the state would disappear. You won't even need the state. You'll have this communal utopia.
Sounds like a really, really mistaken view of human nature.
Well, guess what? Well, how did that work out, right?
Yeah.
So Stalin kills 50 million people, many by starvation. So as for biblical values, both really socialism, communism, are incompatible in their assumptions about human nature. That's where they go south. Both believe it to be either good or at worst neutral, and so it's pliable and moldable if you can create the right kind of environment. And that's why you'll then have this utopia. But then human nature actually isn't like that, and so you end up having to suppress people and oppress people in order to make your thing work. That's what always happens. Human nature is actually neither then good nor neutral. It's evil, it's sinful, as we know from the Bible. And so people do not generally work hard out of the goodness of their hearts and overproduce for the benefit of others. They don't generally do that. And that temporary state then in communism ends up, as I said, being permanent because it can never quite get everyone to do as they should. And so they have to force the issue. Capitalism works because it sees human nature accurately as self-centered and so willing to work hard but for self-interest, but thereby benefiting everybody with jobs and a rising standard. Now, that doesn't mean capitalism doesn't have its problems. It does, and it does create inequities that I personally am fine with trying to better. On this side of heaven, none of it's going to be perfect. So, my view is capitalism is the worst of all of them, except for all the rest.
Well, all right. So those are the two questions that we had submitted, and I think we've sufficiently stirred the pot and pointed to some good ways to think about these things. I'm joking about stirring the pot, but there's a lot going on, and appreciate those guidelines for as things come out. keeping a clear head, focusing on the facts. So hope you found this helpful as well. Just a reminder that this is our last weekly episode. We'll be moving to a monthly schedule after this. The second Saturday of the month, we'll have new episodes. If you want to make sure you remember when they come out, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Hit the notification bell and you'll hear when we have new episodes, and we'll see you in the next one. If you have a question you'd like us to consider, you can send that in to our email address, info@cbctrenton.com, or text it to us at 97000.